Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Let's get into it. She was still laughing when I left. Not at me, I don't think, but honestly, I couldn't tell anymore. The music was too loud, the lights too orange, and I had been standing by that useless shrimp platter for what felt like an hour, watching her flutter between circles like I didn't even exist. Rowena had told me the party was low-key, that it was just some people from work, nothing fancy. She lied. Everyone was dressed like it was the Oscars. I wore the same button-down I wore to my cousin's baby shower. She didn't warn me, didn't wait for me, and didn't even introduce me when we walked in. She just vanished into the crowd with a glint in her eye I hadn't seen in years. Not for me, anyway. At one point, someone tried to hand me a glass of champagne. I took it, even though it made my stomach turn. I don't drink. Not anymore. Not since the hospital, but that's a different story. What mattered in that moment was that she didn't look at me. Not once. Even when I passed directly behind her. Even when I coughed awkwardly near the DJ booth. Even when I thought about tapping her on the shoulder and asking, "Hey, remember me? Your husband?" But I didn't. I stood there like a spare coat. Then I left. Quietly. No storming off. No door slamming. Just the kind of exit you make when you're not sure anyone would notice anyway. I made it all the way to the car. I sat down. Closed the door. Didn't cry. Not yet. Just stared out the windshield at the ugly brick wall of the neighboring building. I didn't even put the keys in the ignition. I just sat in that stale silence that only comes from being forgotten. And then, my phone buzzed. One word. From her. Come. I stared at it for a full minute. I waited for more, something else. A follow-up. A reason. An apology. Even a fake one. Nothing. Just come. Like a command. Like I was still waiting for permission to matter. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart didn't know whether to crack or to hope. And then, the passenger door opened. I didn't even see her coming. 1 second I was staring at the text, and the next, the passenger door creaked open like it belonged to someone else's life. There she was, Rowena, sliding into the seat like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she hadn't just spent 45 minutes pretending I didn't exist. She didn't say hi, didn't explain, just sat there with her arms crossed and eyes straight ahead. Her lipstick smudged just slightly like she'd been drinking more than she could handle. I didn't say anything either. My heart was a war zone of confusion and misplaced hope. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone, tapping a few times, not even glancing in my direction. The silence was suffocating. Finally, I broke. "Did you even notice I left?" She didn't turn her head, but I saw her jaw tighten. "Of course I did," she said flatly. "You were sulking in the corner like a child. It was embarrassing." That hit like a slap, but I swallowed it. "I was standing alone for an hour," I said. "You didn't introduce me to a single person." She rolled her eyes. "Because you don't try, Desmond. You just stand there. You could have walked up, said something, anything, but you always expect me to drag you in." Her voice rose with each sentence, as if my absence had inconvenienced her. I gripped the steering wheel. "So why'd you text me to come?" That got her attention. She turned slowly, her eyes glossy now, and whispered something I didn't expect. "Because I didn't want to go home alone." That sentence split me in two. It wasn't about me. It was about not being alone. I was furniture. Background noise. The safe fallback after the crowd thinned. I stared at her. She didn't flinch. Just sat there, waiting. And I, pathetically, predictably, turned the key in the ignition and started to drive. She leaned her head against the window. I caught her faint reflection in the glass. She looked disappointed. Not in me. In herself. Or maybe in whatever Miles didn't say when the room got too loud. I didn't know it then, but that night was only the beginning. The ride home was quiet except for the engine and the occasional streetlight flickering through the windshield like a metronome, measuring the silence between us. Rowena didn't touch her phone again. She didn't speak. She just sat there, arms crossed, eyes blank, like she had used up all her words for the night and none had been meant for me. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just drove like an Uber driver who wasn't getting tipped. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't wait for me. She stepped out, heels clacking on the pavement, and disappeared into the house. I sat in the car a little longer. Maybe I was hoping she'd come back out. Maybe I was giving her time to say something, anything, before I followed. She didn't. Inside, the living room lights were off, but the glow of her phone lit up the hallway. I saw her silhouette pause, then vanish into the bedroom. No good night. No glance over her shoulder. Just gone. I went into the kitchen and poured a glass of water with hands that still trembled slightly. Not from rage. From realization. I was losing her. Or maybe I'd already lost her and had been too afraid to admit it. The next morning, I found her at the table with coffee and that look she wears when she's thinking about something she doesn't want me to ask about. I sat across from her, said morning, and she nodded without lifting her gaze. Her phone buzzed on the table between us. One glance. She flipped it over. But I saw it. A name. Just a first name. Miles. I didn't ask. I couldn't. Because the truth is, I didn't want to hear the answer I already suspected. Later that day, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up again. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But I did. The screen read, "Last night was a mistake. Call me." My chest sank. Not because of the words, but because they were his. There was something final in them. Not seductive. Not romantic. Just regretful. Like whatever happened between them had slipped out of control, and now they were scrambling to cover the burn marks. That was the first time I realized I had been invited to that party not as a guest, but as camouflage. That word echoed in my head for hours. Camouflage. That's all I was. Just a convenient body to justify her invitation. Someone to stand by the bar and look married while she slipped off into conversations that didn't include me. And now, a message like that from Miles. Last night was a mistake. What did that mean? I paced the hallway long after she'd gone to work, unsure if I was more angry or ashamed. I tried to justify it. Maybe he was talking about something else. Maybe it wasn't physical. Maybe they just flirted, and he felt guilty. But deep down, I wasn't that naive. I could feel the truth tightening around my throat like a collar. I didn't confront her that day. Instead, I started watching. Quietly. Closely. I noticed she was smiling at her phone more. She'd start typing the moment she got home and stop if I walked into the room. When I asked who she was messaging, she'd shrug and say, "Work stuff." Her answers were always vague and short, like she had better things to do than finish her lies. That Friday, she told me she was working late. A deadline, she said. Some rush design project Miles had thrown at the team. "Don't wait up," she added casually, as if that was something we did now. She kissed me on the cheek, the same way you'd pat a dog before heading out the door, and left wearing a blouse I'd never seen before. It had a low neckline. Deliberate, flattering. Not work attire. Not for a woman who spent most of her days behind a desk. I waited 30 minutes before I followed. I'm not proud of it. I took my keys, left the lights on, and drove downtown. Her car wasn't at the office. In fact, the building looked closed. Dark. Deserted. I circled the block 3 times. Then I saw it. Her car, not at work, but parked in a residential neighborhood 2 blocks away. A townhouse I didn't recognize. Porch light on. One car in the driveway. A red one. Not hers. I pulled up across the street and turned off my engine. I waited. At first, I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a glimpse of her through the window. Maybe just some reason, any reason, that would make all this something less than betrayal. But when the front door opened, I saw her. And she wasn't alone. She didn't see me. She was too busy laughing. Not the polite, closed-mouth kind of laugh she gave me at home when I said something dry. This was a wide, unfiltered kind of laughter that made her eyes crinkle and her whole face light up. And the man standing next to her? He looked entirely too comfortable. Barefoot, holding 2 glasses of red wine. Like this was routine. Like this wasn't a secret. I couldn't see every detail from across the street, but what I saw was enough. She leaned into him. He brushed something from her shoulder. Her body language told me everything her mouth had avoided for weeks. I sat frozen in my car, nails digging into the steering wheel, watching my wife laugh like she used to, except with someone else. And the most gutting part? I didn't even feel anger. Not first. Not even second. I felt something worse. Relief. Relief that my suspicion wasn't a fantasy. That my paranoia was justified. That I wasn't going insane. But that relief didn't last long. Because after a few more minutes, she kissed him. Not a peck. Not unsure. Not guilty. It was full. Intimate. Like I hadn't existed for months. I turned my head. I couldn't watch anymore. My breath was shallow, my chest tight. I was trembling, but not from the cold. Something inside me cracked, quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, stunned by the kind of silence that only comes when your world folds in on itself. 10 minutes later, the porch light flicked off. Curtains drawn. I stayed longer than I should have. My phone buzzed once. A text from her, time-stamped 11:46 p.m. Still at work. It might be all-night of stuff. I'll crash on the office couch if it gets too late. Love you. I stared at the words. Read them twice. Then once more. It wasn't just the lie. It was how casually she told it. How practiced it sounded. Like she had done this before. Maybe not with him. Maybe not here. But somewhere, sometime, this wasn't the first night she left me in the dark while she lit up in someone else's arms. That night, I didn't go home. I drove until I ran out of gas. Slept in the back seat like a man without a place. I returned home around 6 a.m., exhausted but too numb to feel it. I parked 2 houses down, like I was the one sneaking around now. The house was dark, and her car sat where it always did, like nothing had changed. I walked in quietly, but I didn't need to. She wasn't home yet. For a second, I wondered if she'd lie again and say she'd left early to grab coffee. But part of me hoped she wouldn't lie at all. I wanted her to confess. I wanted it to spill out of her like something she couldn't hold in anymore. But I was wrong. She came through the door 30 minutes later wearing the same clothes, hair slightly messy, and her eyes met mine like I was just the doormat she stepped over to get to her next line. You're up early, she said, her voice casual, too casual. Didn't sleep well? I didn't answer. I just stared. My silence made her pause, just for a beat. She poured herself coffee like nothing had happened. I leaned against the counter, still watching her. Finally, I said it. I drove by your office last night. She stiffened, only slightly, but enough that I saw it. It was dark. No one there. She turned slowly, her smile fading. You followed me. Her tone wasn't surprise. It was accusation. Defensive. Like I had broken some unspoken rule by catching her lie in real time. You lied to me, I said calmly. You texted me at midnight saying you were still there, that you'd crash on the office couch. But your car wasn't there. You weren't there. There was a pause, just long enough for her to make a choice. And she chose wrong. I went for a walk, she said. After work. I was overwhelmed. You know how stressed I've been. That lie was thinner than paper. With wine? And someone else's lips? I didn't raise my voice, but the words cut the air like glass. She froze. Her face paled. She didn't deny it. That was the moment I knew it was real. Desmond, she began, but I raised my hand. Not to strike. Just to stop the flood of excuses I knew would follow. Don't, I said. Not now? Not like this. She looked down at the floor. Maybe out of shame. Maybe just to avoid meeting the eyes of the man she'd been stepping over for months. She didn't chase me when I stepped out. She just stood there in the kitchen, frozen in her lie, as if the silence might somehow reset everything. I walked past the car, down the street, no destination in mind, just anywhere she wasn't. I ended up at a diner 2 neighborhoods over. It was half empty, and the waitress didn't ask questions when I ordered coffee and nothing else. I sat in the corner booth, watching my reflection in the window more than the street. I didn't recognize myself. My face looked older, more tired than it had any right to be for 36. A man who tried to be dependable and ended up invisible. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not even my brother, who would have lit the world on fire for me if I gave him the word. I didn't want rage. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth, and I wanted to see if she'd finally hand it over without me having to pull it from her like teeth. But she didn't. Not that day. Not the next. She pretended like we'd just had an argument. She asked if I wanted dinner. She put on a movie. She even laughed once, like we hadn't both seen our marriage collapse in the reflection of another man's window. The real turning point came 4 days later. I got home from work early. She wasn't expecting me. I walked in through the back, quietly, habitually, and that's when I heard it. Her voice, low, cautious. Not angry, not guilty, just soft. She was on the phone. I didn't catch the beginning, but what I heard was enough. No, he doesn't know how far it went. He thinks it was just a kiss. I haven't told him about the hotel. The floor dropped out from under me. The hotel. Not a one-time kiss. Not just wine and laughter and blurry boundaries. There was a hotel. And that meant planning. Intention. It meant this wasn't spontaneous. It meant I'd been walking beside a stranger. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I backed away from the hallway like it was on fire. My throat tightened so fast I had to brace myself against the wall. I felt like I was underwater, listening to my life from beneath the surface while it played out above me. She hung up a minute later. I stood outside in the yard pretending to come home again. She smiled when I walked in, lied with her teeth, kissed me on the cheek, and I kissed her back, because what I had planned next needed her to believe I hadn't heard a thing. I waited one more week. I played the part. I smiled when she smiled. I pretended to forget things I'd never known in the first place. I wanted her relaxed. I needed her careless. Because I didn't want just a confession, I wanted clarity. I wanted her to tell me, in her own words, what she thought I still didn't know. The following Saturday, I told her I booked us a weekend away. Just the two of us. A quiet place upstate. She lit up like it was the first romantic gesture I'd made in years. Maybe it was. Maybe it was also the last one she'd ever get from me. We drove in silence. She hummed along to music, completely unaware. I brought her to a small bed-and-breakfast near the lake. Peaceful. Empty. The kind of place where truth didn't echo, it just settled in. That night, after dinner, I handed her a small box. She looked at me wide-eyed, clearly expecting something sentimental. A ring, maybe. A token of renewal. What she found inside was a folded printout. Hotel reservation. Her name. His name. A timestamp from 5 nights ago. Her hand trembled. I didn't speak. I watched her read it. Then I placed my phone on the table and hit play. Her call. Her voice. Every word she thought I'd never hear. She looked up at me like a child caught lying. Desmond, she started, voice cracking. No, I interrupted gently. Don't. I just needed to hear the truth from your mouth. But now I don't need it at all. I stood up. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. That moment, I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. Maybe years. I walked out of the restaurant, left her sitting there with all her silence, and took the car back alone. That was 6 months ago. Today, I signed the final papers. I live in a small apartment now. It's quiet, humble, but it's mine. I've reconnected with old friends. I've even started running again. I'm not healed. Not completely. But I'm free. And for the first time in years, I can breathe without asking someone else for permission. Thank you for listening to my story here on Reddit Confessions. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments. What's one historical event you wish you could have witnessed with your own eyes? Don't forget to subscribe. We share real stories, real confessions, every day.